WCB Podcast, your source for all things Chicago Blackhawks and everything hockey. With your host, Jarom and Tanner.
Let's do it.
Jarom and Tanner.
All right, listeners from the WCB Podcast, it's Jarom. What's up, guys? Rocking solo today. Tanner is on his way in the process of moving back to Illinois, so exciting thing having him back local. So this is going to be good. We're going to do some in-person recordings here soon. So decent amount of stuff going on. I figured I'd just do a quick little solo episode. So if you're still with me, thank you. And if you're about to cash out, because you're here usually for Tanner, he will be back next week, hopefully. So real quick, let's just talk some Hawks talk. I know last week you already touched on what the Hawks should do at number 2. Tanner kind of really talked a little bit about what his mindset was, and while I did agree with it, I had about a week now to think with the news of the Hawks staying at 2 and seeing the options out there, and is there anybody else that should be considered for number 2 than what's being discussed? And doing some research, I've kind of come to the conclusion that it's a 2-horse race for the second pick. It's going to be Demidov and Leshinov. And Tanner's not here to correct my pronunciation, so I apologize. These are the 2 by far the best options at number 2. Unless for some reason Celebrini doesn't go to San Jose, which would be Mike Rear getting fired on the spot if that happens. But, I mean, really best case scenario for both players, one forward, one defenseman. These are the type of guys that the Hawks need to bring in. So whoever they end up going with is going to be a huge addition. What really needs to be hit home here with this selection is this is hopefully the last time the Hawks are going to be picking this low or high or however you look at it in the draft. So there is a little bit of pressure to make sure that Kyle Davidson and his team do their due diligence and make sure they select the right guy for their vision going forward for this future core and what is ultimately going to make the Blackhawks successful. Now, I keep going back and forth on it. I keep reading different scouting reports, seeing comments, and just seeing everybody who's got an opinion on it, and just kind of seeing where their mind's at and what they think the Hawks should do. First off, for Demidov, I mean, there's no question about it. This kid is a absolute can't miss forward talent. You watch some of his highlights in Russia, and it is just absolutely disgusting what he can do. And then you work into the idea of possibly pairing him up with Bedard. And I mean, that right there should get you all sorts of excited. I know a lot of people get a little worried with that whole Russian factor, and the fact that he's playing in essentially what the ECHL is here in North America over in Russia. First off, with the Russian factor, we mentioned it last week. He's already trying to find ways to break his contract. He's got 1 year left. So even if he can't make it over to North America this upcoming season, he will be available the following year, which could actually benefit the Hawks more, put him in more of a competition to, in the spot where he's going to be competing for hopefully competitive hockey. I think that you're really looking at the 25-26 season as the green light to start thinking playoffs and get excited and make those moves and adding the pieces to take it to the next level. Now, with the whole worried about, he's only playing in the ECHL level over there. Yes and no. First, he's tearing it up. He is playing fantastic lights out hockey. I just accidentally closed out his stats, but he's only down there for punishment reasons. He refuses to sign a long-term contract with his KHL club, so they're punishing him. They're sending him down. He only played 4 games in the K and only got about average 4 minutes of ice time per. In 30 games in the MHL, he put up 60 points, 23 goals, 37 assists. And in the playoffs, he had 28 points in 17 games, 11 goals, 17 assists. He did miss the last half of the playoffs because he did have a knee injury. Doctors say he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks and won't require surgery. So that might not even be an issue come this fall if the Hawks go that option. Whereas you look at Leshinov, he's considered one of the best defensive prospects in this draft. He has been viewed as a can't miss, will be a top number one defenseman for whatever team ends up selecting him. And what makes him even better is that he's a right-handed shot, which is something that the Hawks absolutely lack right now in their prospect pool. The right-handed shot is kind of like finding a unicorn in the wild there. Right-handed players in any position is not very common. You toss it up defenseman, that's even harder to find. He has played some fantastic hockey too since coming over to North America. 2 years ago in the 22-23 season, he played for the Green Bay Gamblers, put up 42 points in 62 games, 13 and 29. And this past season with Michigan State in 38 games, 9 goals, 26 assists for 35 points. He also helped lead Michigan State to the Big Ten championship and I believe the second round of the national tournament. So with that in mind, what am I thinking? Well, at this moment right now, if gun to my head, if I have to pick, I'm leaning Leshinov. I think that what I just said, it's so hard to find a right-handed defensive prospect that has the potential to be a number one guy. It's very hard to develop defensemen to begin with. I mean, you see it all the time. These defensive guys come up that have a little hype, and then they just don't pan out, and they either fall to a bottom pairing or seventh defenseman role or lifetime AHLer. Now that could still possibly happen with him, but you have an opportunity to really beef up your right hand side on your defense. He has already played North American hockey, so there's going to be no growing pains there. He could come in kind of like Korchinski did last season and play right away up at the NHL level. And eventually, you know what? He could surpass Seth Jones and take over that number one spot. The reason why I'm not going with Demidov right now is while I know I'll probably end up kicking myself for it, but while I don't I know I don't doubt he's an absolute elite offensive threat who make plays that any hockey player would dream of making. I believe in this league, you can find somebody in the draft with the 20th pick, trade, move up, use your draft capital that you've collected over the years in this teardown and move up in the draft and get another piece. B, you can go out to free agency, you can go out to trades, you can bring somebody else in to play on the wing, which we'll get an idea there in a second. And C, if you're looking for someone to play for Bedard and be on his level, I mean, you look at the McDavid effect, you look at the Crosby effect. Whoever you put on his line is going to end up playing to his level. Look at Phil Kurashev and just the difference of getting the opportunity to play full-time with an elite level player like Bedard and what it did for his season and his numbers. And now he's looking as a legitimate top 6 forward going forward because of his play with Bedard. You can find enough forwards in this draft, in this league, to fill those roster spots. I don't think it is as easy to find defensemen, and that is why I would focus that second pick on Leshinov. Now, again, that's gun to my head if I had to pick right now. I can be convinced either way. Like, that is the best thing about this situation is, oh no, are we going to get the really good defenseman or are we going to get the really good forward? How can you lose when you're in your team's in that situation? That's the way it's going to be going forward. And whoever is going to be picked. Like I said, Kyle Davidson and his teams, they have to check all the boxes. They have to double check. They need to do all their due diligence. They need to really nail these interviews and make sure they're asking the right questions, because in theory, this will be the last time for the next few years that the Hawks are drafting top five. And I say in theory, I mean, it could obviously happen again. Anything can happen. Injuries go down. We saw how this season went with all the injuries. But in a perfect world, this is the last time the Hawks draft early. You get the good pick. You lock down that future core piece, and then you move on to the future, and you look at who you could bring in the later draft rounds and free agency and trades. So Leshinov is my pick right now. I will tell you too, I'm doing a series on Hockey Buzz about 6 different prospects that could potentially be number 2. Doing some research on that Caden Lindstrom. Whew. For a brief second, it slipped in my mind. Maybe him. Maybe he'd be too. But then I woke up and realized, no, that's fine. If he falls to 20, awesome. If the Hawks trade up and get him, even better. Let's move on. I talked about, trading to build up your forward core. Today, Nik Ehlers. Sorry about that. I accidentally hit the power turned off the power underneath my desk. Okay, the Winnipeg Jets today announced Nik Ehlers is up on the trade block, and they're open to hearing offers. I am curious if this is just another Scheifele Hellebuck situation where last year they dangled them out as trade bait and then went on to sign them to 8-year deals. So thinking about him, if he's really on the block, is this a player that the Chicago Blackhawks could essentially look at? He has got 1 year left at a $6 million cap hit. He's 28 years old. He's a left winger, so he is a wing that could play with Bedard. He played 82 games last year, 25 goals, 36 points, or 36 assists for 61 points. It would be a huge boost. I mean, he is a very solid winger, easily be at the top 6. He can go on the second line, first line. He can play with, Anthony, Reichel, and him. He could play with Bedard and Kurashev, or whatever combinations you want to throw out there. Is this a player worth, looking out for? I think it is. I think this is where the Blackhawks have a lot of advantage coming in with a lot of draft capital and still salary cap space. I don't know what the Winnipeg Jets are looking for, but playing around, throwing some ideas out there with the guys, I said, why not toss out the 2025 first round pick via Toronto, a second round pick from this year, and a prospect, Cole Gutman, somebody like that who can play up in the NHL, but maybe just doesn't have a spot on this team. I don't know why you wouldn't look into it. I think that's also a player. He's 28 years old. So, I mean, that's another player that you could probably sign to a 2-3 year extension, get him to, early 30s and be a big factor when the team starts being competitive again. I think too that Bedard's play at the World Championship is just showing that adding additional players of high skill. I mean, I know this is a no-duh statement, but I mean, it should be a wake-up call for Hawks management and Kyle Davidson to realize, like, you know what? If we're looking to take the next step, we might, now's the time to probably add players, because you got Bedard, who is showing what he can do when he's got the right talent around him. Let's go get him that talent. Let's give him everything that he possibly needs to succeed. And that's ultimately going to be what helps this team moving forward. This team is going to go as far as Connor Bedard takes them. And Connor Bedard is only going to take them as far as the tools you give him to use. So Ehlers, he might not be the option. The Hawks might not have exactly what the Jets are looking for, but why not make the offer and why not see? I mean, don't give me the whole divisional like rival BS kind of stuff like that. Like none of that exists anymore. I mean, unless you are two playoff teams within a couple points of each other, that stuff doesn't exist anymore. I mean, I like the idea of bringing him to Chicago, and I think for the right price, it'd be a good fit. If they're going to be looking for, a first round this year or a higher end player like that, it's going to probably price the Hawks out. But it's an avenue worth taking or to take looking. And yeah, KD, I hope he does look at it. Speaking of Bedard at the World Championship tearing it up, it has just been so much fun watching. I mean, the highlights at least. Just him out there playing on a big-ish stage. I know it's not completely same level as like, Olympic or, playoff hockey, anything like that, but playing for your team, playing national hockey, and the players that are on Canada, I mean, it's a pretty big deal. He so far has got 5 goals, 1 assist for 6 points, and he's tied for the lead in goals for the entire tournament, and he's tied for third in points with 6. Yeah, he looks like he's having fun out there. He is just showing off all the skills. His goal on what was it, Tuesday? Yeah, goal on Tuesday against, was it Austria? Where he kind of whiffed on the shot off the toe and it goes in, banked it off like the goalie skate. And one of the announcers just losing his mind thinking that he did that on purpose. And it's like, it's just so funny thinking how good you have to be that these people think that your mess up is done on purpose. I mean, that's just, it's ridiculous. One person who's not really a big fan of Bedard is Jacob Voracek, who's been doing some commentary for the tournament, and he's talking about how he doesn't like how Bedard no-sells his goal celebrations. He doesn't smile, he doesn't celebrate. He also said this after Bedard scored the 5th goal in a 5-1 game. So it's like, I don't understand like what you want to, like, what do you want him to do? You want him to sell you like he just scored game 7 overtime? No, like that's the disrespect is celebrating like that when you're beating a team like that. It's not celebrating. I mean, I don't know why that's even an opinion or why that's something he even felt he needed to say, but I mean, that's just a piss poor take in my opinion. Other than that, I mean, I'm just going to keep this nice and short. I don't think there's too much else going on. I mean, there's obviously playoff hockey going on, but I'd rather wait for Tanner to be back and we can kind of recap it. I mean, these playoffs have been great. I absolutely love the Florida Panthers going full heel mode. Sam Bennett being the biggest bad guy in the league right now, taking out Marchand, and then his move to get the go ahead goal, pushing Coyle into Swayman and just putting it home. I mean, people love it if it was Marchand doing that shit, but the fact that it's someone else and it's against Boston, it's all hell's breaking loose. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm gonna keep this short. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode 275. I don't know what to call it. We'll figure it out when I post it. Make sure to follow us on all social media at WCB Podcast. Follow us on your favorite podcast feed, Spotify and Apple Podcasts are the big one. Subscribe to the YouTube. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Love you boys. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the WCB Podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast. To connect with Jarom and Tanner, check out the boys at WCB Podcast on all social media. We'll see you next time.